Welcome back, beautiful souls. You know, there's something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. It's one of those topics that makes people sit up a little straighter, tilt their head, maybe even cross their arms. You know, I wasn't sure if I was going to go here, but Spirit said, Jessica, it's time. So here we are. Buckle up, Buttercup, because today we are going deep into one of the most powerful, most misunderstood, and often most emotionally charged topics in the entire human experience: religion versus spirituality. And yes, I said it, we are going there. Because this conversation isn't about separation, it's about reclamation. It's about finding your truth in the middle of what you were taught to believe, what you were conditioned to obey, and what your soul actually knows. We're diving straight into the conversation of what they mean, what they don't mean, and how we as awakening souls can find freedom between them. So take a breath, because this isn't one about who's right or wrong. It's about remembering who you are underneath all the programming. Let's open this space with intention. I know some of you listening were raised in very religious households. Some of you have walked away from organized religion feeling confused, guilty, maybe even a little angry. Some of you still hold your faith close, but you've been feeling this tug, like your spirit wants to stretch beyond the walls of doctrine into something more expansive, more personal, more alive. And others, well, maybe you've never fit into any of those boxes, but you've always felt connected to something greater. You've always known there was more. Today, we're going to unpack all of it, not to choose sides, but to dissolve them. Because true awakening is not about rejecting where you came from. It's about remembering why you came here. You see, religion and spirituality are like two rivers that were always meant to flow towards the same ocean, an ocean of divine connection. But somewhere along the way, humanity started building dams. We said, this path is holy, that one isn't. This text is sacred, that one is blasphemy. This name of God counts, this one doesn't. And in doing so, we began dividing the very thing that was supposed to unite us, our connection to Source. Now let me set the scene. You were standing at the edge of a wide old bridge. On one side, the church, the pews, the incense, the hymns, the rituals, the Sunday best. On the other side of the bridge, there's crystals, meditation, cushions, nature, and the sound of your intuition whispering louder than any sermon ever could. That bridge, that's where most of us stand wondering, do I have to choose? I want you to know right now, no, you do not have to choose, and you never did. The sacred has always been big enough to hold both. The real question is which part of it still feeds your soul and which part has you living on autopilot. Because for too long, too many of us have mistaken discipline for devotion and dogma for divine truth. We've been told that faith should come with fear, that obedience equals holiness, and that questioning means rebellion. But what if the real rebellion is remembering that you can experience God, Source, Spirit, the universe, whatever word lights you up, without anyone having to translate it for you? That's where we're going to explore today. Not to tear anything down, but to lift the veil and look at the heart of it all. Because underneath every doctrine, underneath every ritual, every scripture, every chant, there is a shared longing. The human longing to feel connected, guided, and loved. Religion gave us structure. Spirituality gave us the breath inside that structure. But somewhere along the way, the breath got trapped in the walls. And today, we are setting it free. Now, before we get too deep into it, I want you to feel your feet on the floor. Go ahead and take a second and feel the earth beneath you. Take a slow breath in and let that out. As you exhale, imagine releasing any old guilt, any fear of being wrong, any anxiety that says you are not spiritual enough or faithful enough. You are exactly where you need to be, because what we're doing right now is not rebellion, it's remembrance. And when we remember, we reclaim. Now, I'll share that I grew up around people who equated holiness to perfection. Everything was about rules, what to wear, what to say, how my hair should be uncut, and what I was supposed to believe. And yet, even back then, I could feel something was missing. I remember sitting in a service one day and the pastor's voice echoing, people shouting, "Amen," all around me. And I felt this wave of quiet rise up inside. It wasn't defiance. It was this whisper that said, there's more than this. Not better, but definitely more. That whisper, it never left me. For some of you, that whisper came in a hospital room or during a heartbreak or standing in the middle of nature, realizing you could feel God in the wind more than in the words. That whisper is your soul calling you home. Religion and spirituality, they are just two languages describing the same love. One is structured, one is spontaneous. But when structure loses spirit, it becomes control. And when freedom forgets its roots, it can drift into chaos. The magic happens when you remember that you are allowed to build your own altar right where you are. So let's talk about religion for a minute. Not to bash it, but just to understand it. Religion at its core was humanity's first attempt to organize the sacred. It gave us community, belonging, and a sense of rhythm. It said, let's mark time by the moon, the harvest, and the stories of our ancestors. It gave birth to temples, songs, languages of devotion, and art that could just move a soul to tears. These are not small gifts, but the moment fear entered the conversation, the moment we started saying, my God is the only God, or you must come through me to reach the divine, that is when the connection started to fracture. Power replaced purpose, and the sacred became property. Religion was humanity's first organized attempt to understand the mystery of existence. It gave structure to faith, ritual to reverence, and community to belief. It helped people to find hope when life felt uncontrollable. Now, religion, when it's rooted in love, gave humanity a moral compass, a rhythm of prayer, and a sense of purpose. The issue is not religion itself, it's what we've done with it. It's how, over time, man's interpretation began to replace divine inspiration. We started worshiping the rules instead of the relationship. The ritual became more important than the reason, and the collective forgot that the kingdom of heaven was never out there, it was always within. You see, the truth is, religion at its best builds communities, at its worst, it builds cages. And spirituality at its best liberates, and at worst, it isolates. So what's the balance? The balance is discernment. Ask yourself, does this belief expand me or does it shrink me? Does this rule lead me closer to love or deeper into fear? If it does not lead to love, it is not the truth, period. Now, I know that some of you listening might have experienced deep hurt within religious spaces, shame, rejection, or spiritual abuse. If that's you, I see you. Trust me, I see you because I have been you. You are not broken. You are brave. You walked away not because you lost faith, but because you refused to keep confusing pain for presence. There is a huge difference between the two. And some of you might still feel or find deep comfort in religion, and that is beautiful too. because religion can be medicine when it's aligned with heart. It gives structure to chaos, language to awe, and community to solitude. What I'm saying, you get to choose what parts to keep. You don't have to throw away the hymns that make you cry, or the stories that remind you to forgive, or the rituals that help you feel grounded. You get to keep the soul of it and release the shame. That's what reclaiming your sacred why is all about. The why behind your faith. Why do you believe what you believe? Is it because it was handed to you? Or because you felt it in your bones? Because when belief becomes embodied, that's when it becomes truth. I remember reading this line once and it said, God has no religion. And that hit me like a straight lightning bolt. Because when you really sit with that truth, you realize that source, spirit, the universe, the divine, whatever name you resonate with, was never limited by a label. It doesn't care what language you pray in or which direction you bow. It only cares about the vibration behind it. It hears the heartbeat, not the hymn book. So when many people walk away from religion thinking that they're walking away from God, but in reality, they're walking toward God, the God they never were introduced to, the God that is not bound by fear or hierarchy, but lives as a pulse of unconditional love inside of you, inside of all of us. That is the beginning of spirituality. Now, one of my favorite things to do is sit under the stars. And I remember once sitting on the beach, looking up at the stars after a long day, questioning absolutely everything, my purpose, my identity, the meaning of life, the usual Thursday night existential crisis, right? And I looked up and said out loud, if you're real, meet me where I am and not where they told me to be. And I swear I felt the air change. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't thunder, but it was this overwhelming peace that said, finally, you're talking to me and not about me. That is the difference between religion and spirituality. One talks about God, the other talks to God. Religion builds a map, spirituality asks you to walk it. Both of those can coexist, but only if you remember that the map is not the destination. And I think deep down, most of us already know this. We've just been conditioned to believe one way and afraid to admit it. We're afraid to lose our tribe. We're afraid to lose our titles and our traditions. But here's the truth. Your relationship with the divine will always evolve. You're not betraying your roots. You are growing from them. Think of it like this. A seed does not dishonor the soil when it becomes a flower. It fulfills it. So maybe it's time to stop apologizing for blooming, because faith, real faith, does not fear evolution. It welcomes it. Spirituality is not about rejecting religion. It is truly about remembering your direct line to the divine. It is a personal relationship with truth that is not mediated through a building, a title, or a translation. It is you sitting in silence, feeling that electric stillness that reminds you that you are not separate. Spirituality does not ask you to believe out of fear. It invites you to know through experience. You don't have to earn divine favor. You already are divine favor, embodied. And this is where it gets juicy, because spirituality will dismantle everything you thought you knew about yourself. It takes you from worshiping the divine outside of you to realizing the divine within you. It's no longer, God, please help me. And it's more, God, let me remember who I am. But here's where many people get stuck, especially when they are transitioning out of organized religion. There is this in-between space that feels very disorienting. Like you've left the safety of the old belief system, but you haven't yet built a new one. That is where the healing happens. That is the wilderness of awakening. That is where you meet yourself beyond the conditioning because religion taught you who to be. Spirituality reminds you of who you already are. And this is where we start reclaiming our sacred why. You see, when you peel back all the layers of religion, the dogma, the history, the control, you often find that the original intention was always about union. It was always about remembering that we are children of the same source. Jesus didn't come here to start Christianity. Buddha didn't come here to start Buddhism. They came here to embody consciousness. They came here to show humanity what union with God looks like in human form. And then what did we do? We turned their lives into systems, their teachings into rules, and their essence into division. We made religions out of their revelations when they were trying to show us revelation was an inside job. That is why I believe spirituality is the continuation of what religion tried to teach us, but without the middleman. It is the next evolution because we no longer need an external authority to access God. We just need presence. Now, don't get me wrong. There's definitely beauty in ritual. There's power in community prayer. There's holiness in sacred spaces. Religion gave us rhythm, but spirituality asks you to remember the song. And when you sing that song from your soul, it does not matter what name you call it. It all echoes back to the same truth that we are one. So, I want to ask you a question right now. Who taught you about God? And who told you you couldn't talk to God directly? Because somewhere along the line, many of us inherited a belief that God was distant, that God was watching us from above, tallying our mistakes. But what if God is breathing through you right now? What if that voice of intuition, that gentle knowing, that pull in your heart that says, go this way and not that way? What if that's God? Religion taught us to bow our heads. Spirituality teaches us to lift our eyes, to see the divine in everything. The trees, the ocean, the stranger smiling at you in passing. That is all God winking at you through creation. And this is what I want you to feel right now, not just understand. Because this isn't a debate, this is a remembrance. You are a living prayer. Every breath you take, every time you choose compassion, every time you forgive, you are worshiping in the temple of the now. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to choose one or the other. You can honor both. You can sit in a church and feel spirit. You can sit in nature and feel spirit because spirit is omnipresent. That's what the mystics of every religion try to tell us. The deeper you go into your own experience, the more you realize they were all pointing to the same mountain. They were just describing different sides. Now, before we continue into the deeper layers of this conversation, because, we are just getting started, I want to take a quick moment to breathe with you and bring our awareness back to the heart. So place your hand over your chest, right where your soul speaks. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose and exhale it through your mouth. And let's honor that breath. The same breath that connects you to the life force moving through every being on this planet. That breath is divine. You are divine. And this entire conversation, this awakening, it is about remembering that truth. Now, let's pause for a quick invitation. If we're talking about what we're talking about right now is stirring something in you, that sense of, yes, this is the conversation I've been needing, then make sure that you're subscribed to Awaken Your Authentic Self. It is how this work finds the people it is meant to reach. And if you love what we're creating here together, share it with a friend who's questioning, who's healing, who's ready to remember that their connection to the divine doesn't have to fit inside of anyone else's box, because this is not about rejecting religion or replacing it. It is about reclaiming your relationship with the sacred in a way that feels alive again. Now that we're grounded, now that we're subscribed, let's keep going, because the second half of this is where we're going to get into some transformation. So, before this episode, I had been reflecting a lot lately on how religion didn't just shape individuals. It shaped entire civilizations. It built cultures, governments, laws, and moral codes. And that's powerful when it's rooted in love, but dangerous when it's rooted in fear. Because fear disguised as holiness can look convincing, it can sound righteous, but when you look closer, fear-based belief is about control and not about connection. And when we are controlled emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, we forget that God gave us free will for a reason. That free will was not meant to make you obedient. It was meant to make you sovereign. See, when religion tells you that God is something you have to earn the approval of, it creates this hierarchy. It says that you're small, God's big. You are flawed, God's perfect. You are separate, God's unreachable. But when spirituality comes in, it reminds you that you were never separate to begin with. You are an extension of God consciousness having a human experience. You are not trying to become divine. You are trying to remember that you already are divine. And that shift changes everything. Because when you remember that truth, you stop living to please an invisible judge and start living in alignment with your soul. You stop striving to be good enough and start being authentic. That is what I call spiritual maturity, when your choices come from love instead of from fear. And that is what is happening on the planet right now. You can feel it. We are in a mass awakening where people are questioning everything that they were taught to believe, not to reject it, but to understand it from a higher frequency. We are realizing that the old systems, including religious systems, were built in an era of hierarchy and control, and humanity is evolving beyond that now. Consciousness is demanding equality, unity, and personal sovereignty. The mystics, the prophets, the enlightened ones, they all knew that this day would come, that one day humanity would no longer need intermediaries to connect with God, because we would remember our own direct access. We'd stop outsourcing our power and start embodying our light. That's what spirituality is doing. It is bringing God home. It's shifting the temple from outside walls to your inner heart space. And here's the thing. When you awaken to that inner temple, you realize God never asked for blind faith. God asked for trust. And those are two very different vibrations. Faith can sometimes be about following what you've been told. Trust is about feeling what's true. And when you live from that inner truth, religion and spirituality stop being opposing forces, and they become different dialects of the same love language. You can read sacred scripture and find alignment, not because you're being told what to think, but because your soul recognizes truth when it hears it. You can meditate, you can pray, chant, or dance. It all counts, because worship is not in the method, it is in the moment. And in that moment, you realize that your soul came here to experience all aspects of the divine, not just the light and love, but the contrast that makes you remember who you are. You came here to awaken through experience. That's why so many of us had to unlearn religious shame. That's why we had to break free from should and sin to remember sacred and sovereign. And I'll tell you something else. When you start remembering that your body is sacred, that your emotions are sacred, and your desires are sacred, your life becomes a living altar. Every breath you take, every choice you make, every moment becomes a prayer of embodiment. That is spirituality in motion. That is what we are awakening to as a collective. Heaven on earth is not a place we go when we die. It is a state we create when we remember who we are here and now. Religion told us to look for the light in the sky. Spirituality reminds us that the light has always been within. And when we embody that light, that's when miracles happen. Not because we beg for them, but because we become them. I want to leave you with this. No matter what your relationship with religion or spirituality has been, remember this. The divine does not need you to get it right. The divine just wants you to remember. Remember the love that was there before the doctrines. Remember the truth that exists beneath the rules. Remember the God that never left you, because you were never meant to fear God. You were meant to be the expression of God in human form. So as you go about your week, notice where you still separate yourself from source. Notice where you still say, I'm not enough, or I'm not ready. And then gently whisper back, I am already holy, because you are, and you always have been. Before we close today, I want to invite you into something sacred. If you've been listening to Awaken Your Authentic Self and you're feeling those inner shifts, the deep remembering, the peeling away of layers, you're not alone. Our community was created for exactly this journey. It is a sacred space to explore your spiritual gifts, understand your soul blueprint, and truly live your awakening in real time. Continue to join us as we continue walking this path of remembrance together. And speaking of what's next, next week's High Priestess Energy Portal is going to be powerful. We'll be working with the energy surrounding the week of November 16th, where Spirit is guiding us into deeper alignment with our higher truth. The message I'm already feeling for the collective is this: release the illusion of separation. You'll feel this as situations that push you to integrate what you've been learning, where you'll no longer be able to deny your own power. The veil between your human and higher self will feel thinner, and your intuition will be louder than ever. We'll dive deep into that next week, so stay tuned. And drum roll, please. I wish I had a drum roll thing here. Next week's episode is going to be extra special because I will be joined by Kara Goodwin, the incredible author of Your Awakening, Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living, and the host of the Soul Elevation podcast. Kara is such a beautiful light and a deeply grounded soul who bridges consciousness, healing, and the everyday human experience in such a relatable way. We'll be talking about what it really means to live your awakening while balancing the realities of human life, the messy, beautiful, imperfect parts of being both spirit and flesh. Trust me, you will not want to miss that one. So, my loves, until then, take a deep breath. Place your hand over your heart one last time. Feel that pulse. That's your reminder. You are here, alive, connected, and divine. You are the living bridge between heaven and earth, and no matter what anyone has ever told you about who or what God is, know this. The divine essence you've been searching for, it's been you all along. I'll see you next week. Until then, stay awake, stay aligned, and as always, stay authentic.